In the heart of a lush and bountiful African kingdom known as Ilife, nestled between sacred mountains and rivers, there was a peaceful village ruled by a wise and noble king named Oba Adideo. His reign had been marked by years of prosperity and peace, and his people adored him. Yet, there was one cloud of sorrow that hung over the king's otherwise blessed life. He and his most cherished bride, Ada, had been unable to conceive a child. Ada was the king's most beautiful and beloved wife. Her kindness and grace had endeared her to not only the king but also to the entire village. She was gentle, humble, and wise, qualities that made her a fitting queen. Yet, despite her many virtues, her womb had remained barren. The villagers grew restless as the years passed without an heir to secure the future of the kingdom. The elders, deeply concerned about the lack of succession, pressured the king to take another wife. Although the king's love for Ada was boundless, he understood the importance of producing an heir. With great reluctance, he agreed to marry a second wife, and soon, a woman named Fumi was introduced into the palace. Fumi was striking in her beauty, but she was also cunning and ambitious. She came from a powerful family in a neighboring kingdom, and she had always craved power and prestige. It wasn't long before Fumi conceived a child, and the village celebrated with unbridled joy. The prospect of an heir brought hope to the people, and they showered Fumi with gifts and praise. As Fumi's belly grew larger with each passing day, she began to see herself as the new queen of the palace. She took every opportunity to flaunt her pregnancy before Ada, mocking her barrenness. "The gods have chosen me," Fumi would sneer. "I am to be the mother of the future king." Ada endured Fumi's cruelty in silence. Though her heart ached, she continued to treat Fumi with kindness, offering her advice and support as a fellow wife. The king, unaware of Fumi's taunts, remained devoted to Ada, though he, too, could not hide his excitement for the coming child. However, the gods have a way of humbling those who boast of their fortunes. One fateful night, just as Fumi neared the final days of her pregnancy, she was struck by a terrible pain. She was rushed to the palace midwives, but despite their best efforts, she miscarried. Her child, who was to be the future king, was lost. The entire village mourned, but none mourned more than Fumi, whose ambitions had been dashed in a single tragic moment. Her heart grew even darker with envy and bitterness, and her hatred for Ada festered. The whispers among the villagers began to change. Some began to question whether Fumi had brought this misfortune upon herself through her arrogance and spite. Ada, ever compassionate, comforted Fumi during her loss, offering her prayers and support despite the harsh treatment she had received. But Fumi could not be consoled. She refused to believe that Ada's sympathy was genuine, convinced that Ada secretly rejoiced in her misfortune. "You think you've won," Fumi spat bitterly one night. "But mark my words, Ada, you will never bear the king an heir. I will see to it myself." Time passed, and the palace gradually returned to its routine, though Fumi's resentment continued to boil beneath the surface. Then, in an unexpected twist of fate, Ada discovered she was pregnant. The king was overjoyed, and the village celebrated once more. But as Ada's pregnancy advanced, Fumi's envy reached a fever pitch. She could not stand the thought of Ada giving birth to the heir that she had lost. She became consumed with jealousy, plotting a way to steal Ada's happiness just as she felt her own had been stolen. When the time came for Ada to give birth, Fumi was ready with her scheme. On a stormy night, as thunder rumbled across the sky and the rain beat down on the roofs of the village, Ada went into labor. She was taken to a secluded part of the palace, where only the most trusted midwives attended to her. Hours passed as the sound of the storm outside mixed with Ada's cries of labor. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, Ada gave birth to twins, a beautiful baby boy and girl. The entire palace buzzed with excitement, for not only had the queen given birth to a son, but she had also delivered a daughter, ensuring that the royal line would continue for generations. The boy was immediately declared the future king, and the people sang songs of praise to the gods. But even as the celebrations began, Fumi put her dark plan into action. She had bribed the chief midwife, a woman named Abike, to carry out her bidding. That very night, while Ada lay exhausted and sleeping, Abike crept into the room, stole the newborn prince from his crib, and fled into the darkness. The next morning, when Ada awoke, she found only her daughter lying beside her. Panic swept through the palace as the realization dawned that the prince had been stolen. The entire kingdom was thrown into turmoil. The king, heartbroken and furious, ordered a search of the entire village and surrounding lands, but no trace of the boy could be found. Fumi, pretending to share in the kingdom's sorrow, secretly gloated over her success. The villagers were devastated, and many began to fear that the gods had cursed the royal family. Fumi spread rumors that Ada had displeased the gods and that this was why her son had been taken. Ada, though grief-stricken, refused to give up hope. She spent her days praying to the gods, offering sacrifices and begging for the return of her son. Years passed, then while the kingdom mourned the loss of the prince, Fumi quietly continued her life in the palace. Then, by another twist of fate, Fumi herself became pregnant once more. This time, she carried the pregnancy to term and gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The villagers, desperate for an heir, quickly accepted him as the new prince. Though the king's heart still longed for the son he had lost, he reluctantly declared Fumi's son, Olumide, the future king. As the years passed, Olumide grew strong and healthy, preparing for his role as the heir to the throne. But the villagers could not forget the lost prince. Rumors continued to swirl about his fate, and some whispered that he might still be alive somewhere, waiting to reclaim his place. Then, on the eve of Olumide's coronation, a mysterious boy appeared at the edge of the village. He was no ordinary boy, he bore a striking resemblance to King Oba. His face, his mannerisms, even his walk reminded the villagers of the king. But what was most remarkable was the birthmark on his chest, a crescent-shaped mark identical to the one that the king and all his descendants carried. The boy, whose name was Tand, claimed to have been raised by a poor widow in a faraway village. He had no memory of his early years, but he had always known that he was different. When he came of age, the widow had confessed to him that he was not her true son but had been given to her by a midwife many years ago. Tand, curious about his origins, had set off to find his true family, guided by nothing more than a deep sense of destiny. When Tand arrived at the palace, the villagers were astounded by the likeness he bore to the king. The resemblance was undeniable, and even Fumi could not hide her shock. The king, too, was struck by the boy's appearance and ordered an investigation into his origins. As the investigation unfolded, the old midwife Abike was found and brought before the king. Fearing the wrath of the gods and the king's justice, she finally confessed to her crime. She admitted that she had stolen the prince on Fumi's orders and had left him in the care of a poor woman far from the village. Turned, it was revealed, was none other than the long-lost prince, the true heir to the throne. The revelation sent shockwaves through the kingdom. Fumi, now exposed as a traitor, was banished from the village, her ambitions shattered. Her son, Olimide, though innocent of her crimes, was stripped of his title and lived the rest of his life in the shadow of the true prince. Tand was crowned as the rightful heir to the throne, and the village rejoiced. Eda, after years of heartbreak, was finally reunited with her son. King Oba, overjoyed, declared that justice had been served and that the kingdom would now prosper under Tand's rule. The tale of the stolen heir became a legend, passed down through generations. It reminded the people of Ilife that no matter how deeply the truth is buried, it will always rise to the surface. And it taught them that justice, though sometimes delayed, is inevitable, for in the end, everyone reaps what they sow. And so, under the wise and just rule of Prince Tand, the kingdom of Ilife flourished once more, and peace returned to the land.